Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tuppercast. We took a week off for a break as we were away for a bit, and we've come to the decision that we are going to move the schedule for episodes to be every 2 weeks rather than every week. These episodes do take a bit of time out of our already busy schedule to sit down and make, and in addition to that, we've felt that they've already been moving at a bit too fast of a pace for the number of topics that are actually available. We just don't want to blow through them all and then suddenly hit a wall of nothing else to talk about and then just stop uploading. So for now, we're going to spread it out a bit more and upload every 2 weeks instead of one. It's going to just ease things up for us and allow it to spread out better for you guys. So anyways, in this episode, we are going to be talking about how we speak and communicate with each other. So, when starting out with creating a Tulpa, you're of course going to want to speak to them, whether or not they respond back, and then once they do begin to respond, continue working on these communication skills. This can be done either internally, using the same internal voice that you would use to, say, read a book, or externally, where you do just literally talk into the void out loud, and both of these methods are equally valid. When starting out making a Tulpa, it's of course part of the process to just keep trying to talk to them, but a piece of advice that we find ourselves giving to novices is to not expect a response from them. It just makes it easier to decipher their responses once they do start giving them, and also reduces the potential later on of feeling that you may be parroting those responses or answering for them on their behalf. For me personally, in the past as a kid, I had always talked to my imaginary friends out loud whenever I was alone. Usually it would be at lower volumes than talking to other actual people, but being that it was the way I had always done it, that just made it more what I was used to, and so the method that I still go with to this day. From early on, when she was still an imaginary friend, up until now, when we're alone, I do just speak out loud to Max. I would just speak out random things that were on my mind, things that were related to what I was doing or just related to the environment around me. I was already used to doing this sometimes around other people, where I would just occasionally say something that was on my mind or related to what was going on just for the sake of saying something, but because it usually wasn't actually something critical or important, I was used to not always getting a response from real people either. But doing that was what started to make me notice one of the first signs that she had started to become independent. How I started to get responses from her that I didn't have to imagine or think about her responding to them. She has her own unique voice, different from mine.
And this is how it sounds. Usually I speak using mind voice, which is like another internal dialogue, except in a different voice.
Her way of speaking and choice of words is also pretty different from me, so even if she's fronting and speaking using my voice, it's still quite a noticeable difference, to the point where we have one friend who does know about us and the more in-depth details of how tulpomancy works. They are the only one who Max is comfortable with just casually fronting with and speaking to, and the difference between us speaking, even using the same voice, is noticeable enough that they can actually tell who it is. During the development process, Tulpas can communicate through a number of ways with the host that aren't necessarily verbal at first. This can include the use of head pressures to respond to things, or the use of what is called tulpish, which is an internal communication that's a bit hard to describe, but one where you kind of just know what they're trying to convey without them actually having to speak it. Alternatively, or subsequently, they may communicate using head voice, but your head voice. For some, it can be easy to tell if it's their speaking, especially if they have a unique way of doing so compared to the host, but for others, it may be hard to tell if they're using the same voice. We've seen a good number of people in that position who come to the community to ask for advice, as they're finding it difficult to distinguish if it actually is their Tulpa speaking, as opposed to the host parroting them or it just blending together with the host's internal dialogue. The solution that's probably pretty obvious to this is to try and give the Tulpa their own voice. So, As usual, there's always exceptions, like with Max, but usually when someone is to start a Tulpa from scratch, they won't start out with their own dedicated voice. They may choose or pick one up fairly quickly, depending on how quickly development happens, but as we touched on briefly in a prior episode, if they're struggling with becoming vocal due to a lack of voice, we think it's totally okay to assign them one to get started, and then they can choose to either stick with it or try something else down the line if they wish. Most people will know of a voice, whether of a person in real life or of a character, that they know so well that they can imagine that voice saying just about anything, and this can be a great place to start. Get some practice by imagining that voice in your head saying a variety of different things in different scenarios, or you can help your Tulpa if you know them well enough by occasionally parroting them manually in this voice, if you know or can feel that they'll respond to something in a certain way. Once they're able to latch on and make use of that part of your mind that's able to imagine this voice saying things, they can then start to use that voice by themselves. Obviously, don't use a voice that you hate or have negative connotations with, and do keep in mind that once your Tulpa is able to start speaking with it independently, that they should be free to change to something else if they wish. Of course, this just falls into how, in general, Tulpas shouldn't be forced or expected to have or retain any particular physical attributes. We, as hosts, are already kind of holding them captive inside one brain and body, whether they care or not, so the least we can do is allow them the flexibility and freedom to express themselves however they wish. They may be very happy with their assigned voice, like Max has been, but later on, as they're just exposed to more and more, they may decide that they like something else more, or feel that it suits them better. This is definitely a process that can take a bit of time and practice, but overall, we think that it's worth it down the road, for both the host and their Tulpa to be able to communicate and differentiate from each other more easily. And even once they do firmly develop a voice, they may still choose sometimes to communicate using nonverbal means such as Tulpish. Sometimes the communication of both verbal and nonverbal can be a pretty big advantage. Max and I usually communicate with each other verbally, but I think we've all had moments where there's certain things that you just can't put into words, especially when it comes to feeling a certain feeling or emotion. Well, that's just another one of the Tulpa perks, is that the "you know what I mean" truly is them knowing what you mean without you having to phrase it. The ease of having that strong and effective communication can really come in helpful sometimes, especially for those who have struggled in the past with being able to verbally express themselves to other people. Personally, I've never been terrible at it with other people per se, but having someone who truly actually gets me and how I feel on a level that's deeper than words has definitely been really nice. It's something that we think everybody deserves the chance to experience. Having strong communication and empathy for others through really understanding how they feel, well, that's a core component of good human relationships in general, isn't it? And for some of us, it can really be a way of how a Tulpa can really come into their own, even go above and beyond when it comes to truly being there for you in a way that some might feel is really lacking amongst others in humanity, especially nowadays. However you and your Tulpa decide to communicate and in what voice though, it really does just boil down to having that mutual desire for them to be able to do so, as it's inherently a big part of them having their independence and the ability to express themselves, which is hopefully the end goal of both them and the host. Therefore, it's really not something that should be rushed. Everyone's experience is different, and especially during creation, the time and effort needed can and will drastically vary from one person to another. Some people may very quickly establish a voice and communication with their Tulpa. Others may take a long time to progress past the nonverbal phase.
It is totally okay, encouraged in fact, to take as much time as you need. Keep trying your best to communicate with your Tulpa, give them a helping hand where they may need it, and, of course, believe in them. You never know when the sound of their wonderful voice may come answering to your call.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this episode and for your patience. We really do appreciate you listening and for the great positive feedback that we've received so far. This will be it for us from now, but we do monitor this channel in between uploads, so as always, we welcome any questions, comments, or suggestions that you may have. Until next time, take care and happy tulping. Bye-bye.